Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
All sales conversations have a creator. Sometimes it's the salesperson trying to start one. Others, it includes prospects raising their hand and initializing it. When prospects start the conversation, are you prepared to leverage the opportunity and convert the conversation to a commitment? If you want to close more sales from conversations you don't start, tune in as Bill and I discuss converting quotes to commitments and other great ideas in episode 489 of the Winning and Selling podcast.
So before we have that conversation about converting quotes to commitments, we're going to talk about sales jujitsu, the secret black belt system for champion leaders. And this is section 1, the inner game, chapter 3, strategy. And boy, Scott, he talks a lot about strategy. And I can see that preparation and practice and then knowing what you're going to do has a lot to do with his process.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're painting the living room. You spend a lot more time taping.
That's right.
and marking things off before you end up getting out that roller and starting to paint the room. I mean, think about it. You probably spend 4 times as much preparing as you do painting.
Right. And we talked a little bit about this last week because he started to touch on this, but you know, his time he spends training, but he didn't talk last week about the time he spends developing sales playbooks, scenarios, really thinking through. Probably he talks about 20, I think, but maybe it's 10 to 20 to 30 different situations a salesperson is going to find themselves in, the types of buyers they're going to deal with, the level of interest those buyers might have. And he advises that we get all this information down, especially so that new salespeople, and if I'm going into a new scenario, I can prepare for it.
It's kind of like writing a computer program, the if-then statements. If this happens, then this. And when you play it out all in your mind, and this is a lot what commercial airline pilots do in the flight simulators, they're proposing every possible scenario that could happen while they're flying the aircraft so that they have a natural reaction to be able to respond to what is the best action based on that current situation.
Right. Absolutely. If you watch Sully, the movie about the guy who landed the airplane on the Hudson River, they practiced and practiced different things. And so when it came time to it, they had options in mind. And I don't think salespeople even have questions in mind quite often. So I think too often they go in with their knowledge of the product and a couple of questions that they might ask. And their first question is, so how's it going?
Right. Yeah. So what do you do around here? Great. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much for doing your homework and research. I'm glad I found the place, you know.
That's right. Oh. Yeah, I got your address. So I thought I was really doing some pre-approach.
Right.
And that's what these authors are talking about, especially when they relate it to jujitsu. They really think through, if they make this move, then I make that move. If they try this, I need to do that. And that is really rare air for salespeople if they've thought through that far in what they're going to do in a sales situation. I think we love to fly by the seat of our pants. You use the flying analogy. Yeah. Flying by the seat of your pants is a good way to get killed.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Casualties. What is it? Casualties breeds casualty, something like that. But I do like how he, this is from the book. He says, practice shows your strength and your weaknesses, and it shows it in reality. Use reality to face your problems. If something isn't working, troubleshoot by focusing on where you are struggling, and it identifies the areas that you need to change and you need to improve. This is the same as debriefing a sales call. So even after a fight, I'm sure that they're debriefing going, wow, they did this. I wasn't anticipating that. I should have done that. And next time that this happens, I'll do this and I'll get a different outcome. Well, of course you will.
But we're so embarrassed. We're so embarrassed to talk about why something didn't work out. We're so embarrassed to do a role play with somebody and walk through a scenario like this. And we're just not going to really improve, or we're going to improve through failure at the customer site.
Well, yeah.
That's a really costly way to improve.
Yeah. What I wrote down in my notes is professionals practice in private. And you bring up embarrassment. What is the definition of embarrassment? The definition of embarrassment is being caught out of role. So if you're talking to the prospect the same way that you talk to a baby, that would be embarrassing because you're being caught out of role.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you avoid that? You prepare, you play the role. You have to get ready for a sales meeting, and you can't have a negative attitude of, they're not going to buy from me, or, this is just a waste of time, or, my product's overpriced, or we have supply chain issues. So even if I sell it, there's no way we could fulfill it. So I'm not going to even work hard on selling it because it just creates a bigger problem for me. I hear that from salespeople in today's marketplace too.
Right.
And it's like, if you bring that attitude in, it's going to show. And what kind of reputation do you want to have? And even if the supply chain issues get fixed, and they will get fixed, what's going to happen next is we're going to have a service issue problem where we're going to be able to not find the people that can help us solve the problems because we have the products. Now do we find the people to solve the problems? I digress. Go on.
I thought you were going off the deep end on that one.
I was, yeah. I get triggers. I get triggered. It's triggered.
Well, what it reminds me of is the kid who comes to the door with his wreaths, and he says, "You wouldn't want to buy a wreath, would you?"
Yeah.
And I say, "You're right. I wouldn't want to buy a wreath, kid." And so that's what you're talking about. That's an attitude that says, "I'm already going to lose. You wouldn't want to do this." And I can put up with that with a kid, and I'll say, "You know what, son? You might try a different tact, right? A little bit more positive, and maybe you'll get more sales." And I think salespeople who don't practice, they go in hat in hand, their posture is poor. They don't say you wouldn't want to buy, but everything in their attitude says, "You're not going to buy this, are you?"
Right.
And the customer agrees with them. So I think the game plan, here's what I'd like to hear from our listeners. I'd like to hear if anybody has a sales playbook. And if you could send us just a copy of a page of what does that look like for your company? I would really be shocked if I got more than 5 responses out of our thousands of listeners that have some kind of a sales playbook. They might have a process, but they don't have a playbook that says, if you're dealing with this, if this is what you're selling, if this is the scenario that you're put in, what does that look like and what are you going to do? So listeners, if you have some kind of a game plan, a sales playbook, send it to us. We'd really be curious to see this. The second step, each one of these chapters has three key points. The second one is train, and we talked about that last week, so I won't go into that again. And then troubleshoot, and that is role playing with challenging twists. And so when they role play, they don't lay down the sale for them. They stop it in the middle. They bring in another person. They twist it and change it, and they make the hardest sale the role play, not the easiest. So when they get in with the client, they're ready for all those curveballs that a client can throw at them.
Right. My first job, I was a dishwasher at Mr. Steak, and guess what night I started? Saturday night. It was the busiest night. They threw me in the dish pit. And you know what? Every night after that was not as bad as that busy first Saturday night. And I go, this is not as bad as that night because that was the worst night of my life. Unfortunately, I practice that philosophy with salespeople now. I go, the very first day you're making cold calls. They're like, what? I don't even know what I'm talking about yet. Well, you got to figure that out between now and 2:00.
That's right. And you're not telling them anything. You're asking questions. So
exactly.
Quit acting like you need to know everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. That's a great chapter. Any other thoughts that you have on it?
A couple of things. I like the quote that he brought up from Buddha, how you do anything is how you do everything, which then goes, I thought Stephen Covey said something like that. And he said, a man cannot do good in one area and bad in another. I think that that's really true. And it's tough for us to be doing good in one area and bad in another, or bad in an area and good in another. So I really believe that when you want to reduce the stress in your life, then be consistent on your behavior, whether you're working or not working. It's who you are and that integrity that you have. And when you bring that to the role that you play, everybody wins. So
I think James Allen said you can't be one thing within and another thing without.
Sure.
So whatever, and another quote that I used in a blog that I wrote, whatever's in the well comes up in the bucket.
Yeah.
And so whatever you got down in you is what's going to come up. And if it's not prepared, then that's what's going to come out when you're in a sales situation. So good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we still are doing our book giveaway. We got some people that contacted us this week, and so they're coming in. So if you want to get a good opportunity to get a copy of Sales Jiu-Jitsu by Elliot Bayev and Daniel Muskowitz, we're giving away 2 books each week. You can go to winningatselling.com and just ask us a question, say hello, or just say, I want to be put in the book drawing. And this week, our winners are Mike Mulkey, and he contacted us through the website, and Nigel Green, who contacted us on LinkedIn. So those are both ways to get yourself in the drawing.
Great. Congratulations.
This segment has been brought to you by the Professional Sales Association Accelerate 2022, their half-day selling workshop. Learn more at psamn.org. Start the new year with Accelerate 2022, a great half-day selling seminar hosted by PSA, the Professional Sales Association. The keynote speakers are Daniel Moskowitz and Elliot Bayev, authors of the international bestseller, Sales Jiu-Jitsu, the Secret Black Belt System for Champion Leaders. They will be presenting 4 black belt strategies to double your conversion rate. Also presenting will be social media expert Jennifer Radke, who will present Expanded Social Media Equals More Customers. Accelerate 2022 will be held from 8 a.m. to noon on Friday, January 7th at the Doubletree in Bloomington, Minnesota. Admission is $99 and includes breakfast. Also, the first 30 people to buy tickets will get a copy of the book Sales Jiu-Jitsu. So get your tickets now. Learn more at psamn.org. That's psamn.org.
So our topic today is converting quotes to commitments. And let me draw kind of a context of where we're coming from. And this might be a medium to maybe a larger size company where they get quote requests through the website, or they end up talking to somebody about a quote and then they end up emailing it so that whoever gets the quote can then share it with other people within the organization so they can get somebody to sign off on it. So it's kind of that context when we get these quotes into our business, our company that we work for.
I call that kind of quote a wild ass guess.
Well, it could be.
Do you have a better process than the wild ass guess answering a quote?
And sometimes the context is what's in stock too. So, if you
tell you what we got.
Yeah. So if you work for a company that has 15, 20,000 items, they probably don't have all those items in their warehouse. And with supply chain struggles these days, and it just seems to continue, and there's no end in sight of that, is customers will call and they'll talk to somebody and say, hey, could you give me a quote on this and just tell me how many do you have or how many can you allocate towards me, because there's other customers that the company takes care of. And then that quote is sent back via email to somebody so that they can review it and share it with somebody else. So that's kind of the context that I'm talking about. I don't want to get into the context of RFPs, requests for proposals.
Yeah, that's a different animal.
And these are long 2-day projects where somebody wants office equipment or cubes for an entire floor. So they send out, these requests for proposals to companies to do it. And that is just kind of like throwing money away unless you can really get into a conversation, which some of the stuff we'll talk about today.
Yeah. Isn't my best result if they send me a quote and I just answer it as best I can and send it back? That's all I can do, isn't it?
Well, there's different ways of approaching that. If you really want it, and it's a company that's a perfect fit and it's an ideal prospect, then there's different things that you would do to work that quote to be able to play to your strengths and to be able to interject sort of that trusted advisor advice into the quote on how to do things better, because the person who's doing the quote is probably being influenced by somebody else, and that somebody else is going to play to their strengths when there may be a better solution out there that particular provider who's influencing the quote doesn't offer. It's like a good friend of mine calls from a bank, and he's talking to CFOs, and he says, the bank that you're working with now is only going to offer you the services that they sell. If there's a better service out there that would fit your needs, they're not going to offer it to you because they don't offer it, period. They don't sell it. So the goal of our conversation is for you to meet with one of our bankers, talk about some of the services that we have, maybe introduce some things that are completely new to you that you haven't even heard of. And then you can decide if you want to have us as a backup bank. A lot of our backup customers are now primary customers, but that's how they started. So it's a different approach. I digress.
That's reaching out, isn't it? That's not answering a quote.
Right. It's reaching out.
Okay.
And that's more active prospecting, but it's also concentrating on what you can sell and what you can't sell. So some of the things that I think when a company ends up reaching out to a supplier, a provider, there's information that is being provided, and there's information that salespeople want to know. And, I think the most important thing that, we need to identify as salespeople when somebody reaches out to us is that there is an immediate need. Oh, fabulous. You know how long we do cold calling and we're struggling to find that immediate need? We spend hours and days cold calling to really talk to a prospect that's really interested in making a change or buying something from us. Somebody sends in a request for a quote. These people want to buy now, today, which is why they're reaching out. So we're getting an immediate need. We're, also hopefully talking about what is the desired outcome with this particular product. It's not about the product, it's about what the product will do. It's about the outcome. It's about the solution in application to deliver value, and the people buy the outcome. They buy results. That's what prospects pay for. It's not about the drill. It's about the whole you get from it. We've all heard that 100 times. Another thing that we need to talk about.
I've told you a million times.
Yeah, I told you a million times not to exaggerate. Yeah. And then also within a quote, sometimes the prospects, submit it, and sometimes they don't, is the criteria. The anticipated and expected criteria of how they're going to be making a decision and what parameters they're looking for when they end up looking for a product or service. And I think another thing that we need to ask is, how will they decide? What has the greatest influence in making a decision? I've worked with one company and I've taught the sales team to ask that question. So when it comes to making a change, to buying that product from us over the company that you're buying it from now, what's going to be the biggest change? What's going to be the biggest factor, the biggest influence? They go, well, price and quality. And the salespeople train them and say, that's not uncommon. We hear that a lot. How about if I send you a sample, and then once you get the sample, if you like the quality, you give me a call and we'll talk about price.
Yeah, I think we're getting into specific situations, but what I really think is important is to not see this request for quote as just a piece of paper or a document you send back with numbers filled in.
Yeah, totally.
I think it's really an opportunity to open a dialogue with a new possibility, a new customer. The challenge I see for a lot of companies, Scott, is this request for quote ends up on the desk of the inside salesperson and not on the desk of someone who is trained in selling. And most of the people that I deal with that are inside sales, and they're very good people, but they're not trained to sell. They're trained to quote. They're trained to answer. They're trained to keep up with the client needs and do a very good job in that. But they're usually reluctant to do these things that you're talking about, which is to ask clarifying questions, get more information, try to open that crack a little bit more.
Right. And that's a seasoned salesperson that's really taking on the role as a trusted advisor and being the person that a company, a prospect is interested in changing now. They recognize that the salesperson that they're talking to is an industry leader. They're knowledgeable. They understand what the expectations are, and they also understand the desired outcome. And that is a trusted advisor type of relationship. And those are the salespeople that are really going to be able to talk about the need for a particular item right now and really focus on suggestions and advice of what is the best way of performing whatever activity to get the desired outcome that they want. And
I think the inside salesperson could have that same goal to not be so quick to just answer, but to think about every new quote from a new client or even a new division within a current client is to be able to engage in a conversation and open that door a little bit more. That door a little bit more. What else can we do? What are you really looking for? What are you trying to accomplish? And an inside salesperson could take the conversation so far and say, you know what, Larry, based on the conversation so far, I think you ought to talk to Scott. He's got some really good ideas on things that you can do to use this product more effectively. And would you be willing to have a conversation? And that's inside salesperson can move from just quoting to setting up an interview with the client for the salesperson that they work with, the outside salesperson. So think broader about it. Don't just think about getting that quote done quickly.
Right. And another thing to think about when and along that same line, Bill, is to not think about just the particular item that they want, but also look at other items that they may need. What is the environment of the business based on the products that you're selling? What are some of the things that you know that they're buying from somebody else, they're not buying from you, that you know that they need because you deal in that particular business or that industry, so you know the environment. So
If they're
don't
only
just
asking
focus
for
on,
part A and they need part B and C to make it work,
of
they're getting them
course.
someplace else.
Right, right. And then expand that relationship, because they're dealing with some supply chain issues. This is a limited time, folks, where we can start acquiring and capturing new business. But what's going to happen when the supply chain is over with? Are they going to go back to the person that they bought it from before, or the company, or are they going to stick with you? You got to be sticky, and you got to retain that business after the switch so that they don't revert back to the company that they used to buy it from. And this is a very time sensitive issue. So really work on, I think, creating 3 different anchors or 3 different people within a company that buys from you, so that if one person leaves, you don't lose the relationship completely. You have to start over completely. I mean, it's like you end up calling somebody else and they say, I've never heard of you before. Nobody's ever talked about you before. I don't know. I mean, where do we begin? And now you got to start the whole sales process over, trust and rapport, where if you had more than one contact within a company that you sell to, it would make it a lot easier for you to retain that business when somebody else comes in that's new. So,
Yeah, this all falls under what I call saving the solution. And this is for inside salespeople, this is for outside salespeople. You go into a customer conversation, whether it's through a quote or through something that you generated, you start to have this conversation and you see an immediate need, and then you jump on it and you pull out your catalog and you answer that immediate need. Instead of thinking about, how can I broaden this out? How can I meet more people? You want to get that quick sale instead of broadening this to a larger opportunity. Right. And then you blurt out your solution. And because you blurted it out in the first 5 minutes, that's all it's worth. It's worth 5 minutes. You aren't getting the impact, and you aren't developing something really valuable. And the customer gives you the same amount of value back. Oh, you gave me a 5-minute solution. That must be all it's worth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So save those solutions. Don't jump on the first thing you see. Drive that conversation deeper to find out, why are you looking for us now? Why are you looking for a different supplier? As Scott said, what do you like about the one you're using? What are some things that you wish they did better? Have a developed level of questions so you can drive this conversation deeper, whether you're going to hand it over to the outside salesperson or whether you are the outside salesperson. You can get a lot more business from that quote than just the quote itself.
Exactly. It brings up something that I think we talked about with the challenger sale, is to lead to the solution, not lead with the solution. And that was just a profound statement out of that book that I still resonates with me, is to lead to the solution, not lead with the solution. When you lead with the solution, you're commoditizing your product or service, and you're not understanding the cost and impact of a prospect not buying. And the prospect then does not understand the cost, consequences, and risk of inaction, which is what we all compete against, is people doing nothing. And there's a risk to doing that. And a trusted advisor says, I want to work with you today to avoid the problems in the future. And if it's not broke now, it's not going to work the way you want it to in the future. So let's work together to be able to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that you've got the best products and services that we offer, so that you're able to maintain the highest value to your customers and the highest profit margin to your company too. And that's a salesperson's job. It reminds me of the Paul Harvey thing about a farmer. If you've ever heard that. What a great monologue by Paul Harvey called The Farmer. You should look that up.
Yeah, put a link to that.
Okay, I will do that. I love that. Love that monologue.
Yeah, that's a great one. Well, so let me ask you this question, Scott, because this is the pushback I've gotten from salespeople before. And that is, well, look, if they send me a quote, they just want that answered as fast as possible. They don't want all these questions asked. They don't want this conversation. They need they need something fulfilled right away. And my best thing that I can do to show them that we know what we're doing is to get them a good solution to that quote.
Great. So you're running an ambulance service. Somebody's just had a heart attack. You're the salesperson that's going to come in and pick them up from the ambulance, and you're going to give them a quote for, something they need right away. Fabulous. Okay, you got that right now. But then you got to meet with a doctor before you get discharged from the hospital. And this doctor is the salesperson that's going to talk about the overall problem that you're experiencing, because here's one of the symptoms of the problem is what caused you to be in the ambulance. So think about the symptoms that some of your prospects are giving you and recognize that there's a bigger problem based on the symptoms that you're seeing. And you need to have a serious conversation with them about fixing the overall problem, because the problem the prospect brings you is not always the only problem. It's the tip of the iceberg, and there's symptoms of bigger problems that they have. How does that sound, Bill?
Well, I think that makes sense. So what you're saying is not only can we try to engage them in conversation when we get the quote, but if we fulfill it, we better go back to them and say, now, hopefully that all worked out for you. I want to sit down and have a conversation with you about how that worked, how that solved your problem, and then talk to you about why that problem occurred and see if we can nip this in the bud beforehand and become that trusted advisor. So don't just take those quotes and say, okay, they're a customer now, they're going to send us another quote someday.
Right. Yeah.
You're a stopgap measure in some of these situations.
Yeah.
You are not the main source. And to turn yourself into the main supply source and to broaden out the supplies, you're going to have that conversation post-delivery of the product and find out how you can expand after that. Now you're on the board. Go in there and broaden that out.
Yeah. Yeah. If we don't have another conversation next week about why this happened, it's going to happen again. And you're going to be in the same situation. So can we set aside some time and really talk about the bigger challenge that we're all looking at right now and that needs to change?
So again, inside salespeople, this is the kind of information you need to quote to the salespeople that have that contract, that have that company in their territory. You need to say, hey, look, we got a quote, we bid them out, but it got delivered this week. You might want to talk to them next week. And then it's the ball's in their court to do something with it. But it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Companies are all arranged differently. Sometimes there's inside sales. Sometimes there's outside sales. Sometimes there's sales. And then there's account management too. And if you're in account management, then you're another different role. And the question that I think you come into the office every day stressed out about is, when did we lose the customer? We don't really know sometimes when we're account manager.
I think inside sales doesn't think of themselves in sales often enough. They see themselves in account management.
Right. Yeah.
Supplying that customer with what they need, answering their questions, getting things done. But I think they can be so much more if they take their position and understand the trust level they build up with a customer. And they think about asking a few questions each time they're on the phone with them, rather than just responding all the time.
Right.
How can you take charge? And I work a lot with inside sales people, with inside sales groups. Their value is so high if they will do the things they need to do, but their value is so moderate if they don't do the extra things with those clients that they can do. Right.
It's really the difference between customer service and outside sales.
Yeah.
I mean, customer service people may make about 25% of a salesperson when it comes to salary. Salespeople, can make a lot of money. Customer service is just about 25% of that salary is what, customer service people make.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about?
Nope. I think that was a good topic. Thanks, Bill.
All right. So he's going to link to that. We're going to find that Paul Harvey monologue and link to that. Also going to put a link in there to Professional Sales Association, because we do have that. We do have Daniel and Elliot coming into Minneapolis on January 7th. So that'll be exciting. So as we close out, I have a golden nugget from Muhammad Ali, a quote: "I hated every minute of training, but I thought to myself, suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion."
That he did. Great quote for the topic of the chapter.
Yeah. That's what made me think of it is we don't do enough training. I love Daniel's suggestion that you just train with your sales staff an hour every day. It's going to make the difference in the quality of the appointments. And appointments get hard to come by sometimes. You better make use of every one of those as best you can. Yeah, so true. So go to winningatselling.com for all this information. Enter our book giveaway, Sales Jiu-Jitsu by Elliot Baev and Daniel Moshkowitz. We're doing 2 books a week. So winningatselling.com. Ask a question, say hello. Again, follow up on Bill's request of send us a page out of your playbook. So maybe send us a table of contents if you're comfortable sharing that. Right. And we're not going to share it with anybody, but do let us know what we can share on the air, because we don't want to be breaking any confidentiality. But we do want to be able to be a resource, and there's good reasons for you to be proud of that too. So we'd like to be able to recognize you for that accomplishment. Next week, no book club. So we're going to skip next week for the book, although we will continue to do the book giveaway, but we're going to have the full time to interview Mario McCracken about his book, Really Care for Them. Go out and get better one skill at a time. Joyful selling.